Hello, I'm Lydia Talbot. Welcome to Sanctuary. Chicago is filled with treasures. For example, did you know that Chicago and its suburbs boast more theological seminaries of more denominations and faith traditions than any other American metropolis? From Deerfield to Lisle to Hyde Park, Chicago is a global center of theological education. In this edition of Sanctuary, we focus on Chicago Theological Seminary, adjacent to the University of Chicago in Hyde Park, where students are educated not only to become pastors and theologians, but also to become leaders in a multitude of out-of-the-box vocations. Chicago Theological Seminary educates leaders for the next, whatever that next might be. Join us for some stories that will challenge what you think about your politics and your faith today on Sanctuary. Since 1855, Chicago Theological Seminary has been pushing the boundaries of theological education, forging leaders for the next. Ministers, advocates, chaplains, educators, activists, all ready for the next generation of religious leadership, whatever that might be. An early advocate for social and racial justice, women's and LGBTQ rights, CTS has always been a leader in progressive religious thought. It's no wonder Chicago Theological Seminary is one of the few seminaries anywhere that is actually growing. CTS has pushed at the growing boundaries of the church in order to make faith more relevant and transform society towards greater justice and mercy.
Tens of millions of people live in poverty in the richest nation in the world.
I'm rebellious in a good way. I guess you could say that. I love serving and working within more marginalized communities. It basically allows me to live out my faith. I have just came off of a 40-day mass action where we literally shut down the state's capital with various protests. We're calling out our elected officials here in the state of Washington because we are literally third in the nation for homelessness. Should I say this on camera?
Tens of millions of people live in poverty in the richest nation in the world. We live in a society that spends 53 cents of every federal discretionary dollars on military and only 15 cents on anti-poverty programs.
40 days of mass action. Every Monday, we literally gave the city of Olympia hell. 20 people would be arrested one day, then 16 people the next day. And Olympia is a very small town, and so the police and the state troopers didn't really have the capacity to handle the amount of arrests that was happening each week. I probably identify just as much as an activist as I do a minister of the gospel. I think they're both married to one another. I think that you cannot call yourself a minister of the gospel without working with marginalized communities. Jesus was a social justice warrior. Speak up for those who are poor, those who are marginalized, those who are most affected in this society. CTS gave me the okay to be who God has called me to be. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King has a CTS connection. Jesse Jackson also has a CTS connection. So CTS has been at the forefront of activism. My calling was activism in a way. CTS helped me to flush it out a little more, but I knew somewhere deep down in my spirit, I knew that activism was going to be the catalyst for my ministry. It was going to be the was going to be the heart and soul of my ministry, basically. And so knowing that CTS had that rich history of activism and had ties with various different activists, I knew that this would be a seminary like no other. There's a light within you, and don't ever let anyone take that light out of you. What I would say to my 16-year-old self is, Bianca, CTS will be the place where that rebellious warrior woman spirit that you have, they will help cultivate that. They will help hone those skills and turn it into something positive. CTS, I felt like I could be that rebellious social justice warrior spirit and it'll be welcomed. CTS told me, you better go and rock that boat. Make sure you rock that boat.
I guide wilderness trips that are designed to give people a dose of spiritual sustenance. The people that we're looking to bring into the wilderness are care providers, justice workers, faith leaders of all sorts. These are the people who are bringing compassion into the world and are often burning out in the process. We use wilderness as a resource to take deep breaths, to find some breathing room for your soul. And there's a sweetness and a spirituality that happens when people step away from the things that insulate them from the natural elements. A beautiful something happens, and that something we call renewal. We're going and spending multiple days sleeping in tents and having conversations and taking time to be silent and spend time in solitude, and ultimately getting a sense of sustenance for our spirits. CTS was the place of origin for my work in the world. I went to Chicago Theological Seminary. I graduated in 2013 with an MA in Religious Studies. CTS is a place where students can become creative question askers rather than people who have all of the answers. I didn't go to CTS in order to become an ordained minister. I went to CTS as a part of my spiritual becoming, as a part of my journey toward wholeness. Oftentimes I tell people that I experienced a conversion to curiosity later in life, and CTS encourages people to unpack their concepts of the divine. It's a place that's for teachers, it's a place that's for social workers, it's a place for therapists, it is a place for ministers, and it's a place for wilderness guides.
My name is Tim Wolf, and I am the pastor of Gather, a new church plant in Austin Oak Park.
My name is Shay Watts. I'm a church planter. Church planting is exactly what it sounds like. It's taking seeds, it's planting it into the soil, it's giving it what it needs to grow so that it will bring life into the area you sow it into. On the surface, we are very different.
There's a lot that's alike about us, too.
He lives in Chicago with his partner, Walt. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina with my wife, Catherine.
I'm same-gender loving, and he's heterosexual. I guess that might be the most glaring thing. He loves sports. I don't understand sports at all. He lives down south. I live in Chicago. He's a vegan. I'm a meat eater. We could go down those differences for a while. Oh, yes, age. I'm a lot older than he is. The church planter goes into a community and says, there is not this kind of gathering of people, if you will, and so we need to start the way Jesus did it. He did it sitting around in public spaces and in banquet halls and in restaurants, dinners.
Tim is the pastor on the ground. He is there every Thursday night with Walt, and they are sort of living this thing out tangibly in the room. I take care of all the online things.
So we convert a coffee shop into sort of a worship and learning space. We start moving everything around and we get everybody in place. We set up a screens for the slides and we get the music and all of that in place. It's go time at 7:30. At the same time that we do that, there are people gathering online on Facebook.
I monitor emails. I'm on Facebook Live. I'm connecting with people that, like me, would like to be in Austin Oak Park area but aren't able to be.
There are people from all over the country and Scotland, all sorts of places who have found us, who come in to watch what we're doing on that Thursday night. We're ecstatically inclusive. We are at our happiest when we're at our woolliest and wildest, and the widest variety of people are there.
I met Tim Wolf while I was an online student at CTS.
We didn't meet face to face until he finished his program and came up to Chicago to graduate.
We met for breakfast one day.
We began to, what would the service look like? What would the room look like?
Things started to fall into place.
And then they brought the bill and
Tim flips over the greasy receipt, took the pen, and began to write out the vision for this church.
this is what the worship service would look like. This is what the space would look like.
What would it look like to start a church where people like us could come and bring some of that heritage and we could worship together and we could read books together and we could ask questions?
If we can reach those folks who are hurt and say, there has to be a place for me in this kingdom. If you have a calling or an aptitude or an impulse toward an activist kind of ministry, CTS gives you the tools to go do that. Yeah, what I loved best about CTS was the community, and not just the community in the face-to-face classes at the seminary, but also the community that I met online, plus the faculty, plus the donor base, plus the board, plus everybody, and all the alumni. It's almost like you get dropped into a pool and the ripples start, but what happens is the community just keeps getting bigger and stronger as the longer you're there.
It brought healing into my life. There are areas of my life that I thought were dead. I thought perhaps church was something that I would walk away from and never return. CTS was somewhere I needed to go. I knew that if I could just get in and get around the people in the community there, that my life would be shaped for the better, and it was.
My name is Vanessa Gomez-Brake. I am a Master's of Divinity student at Chicago Theological Seminary. I'm also the Associate Dean of Religious Life here at the University of Southern California. I'm a humanist, and as a humanist, I believe in good for goodness sake. Humanism is a philosophy of life without supernatural belief. It basically just says that we believe in leading ethical lives for the greater good of humanity. What is religion? That's a very academic question. Spirituality to me is how one grounds themselves on the daily, whether it's that morning bike ride or that evening meditation. More than half of the students here at the University of Southern California do not believe in a faith tradition. Spirituality on this campus is really diverse. I think the definitions we've been using for religion and spirituality and philosophy have really changed in the last few generations. And so while many of our students are partaking in worship opportunities and Bible studies here in the Religious Center, there's also those who merely want to come together for a meal, for a hangout, to have real connection as opposed to just going about their daily lives. They're seeking connection with others, that social cohesion. I'm merely present for anyone who walks through that door. Here at the Office of Religious Life, we have mindfulness programs, we have movement programs, we have all sorts of ways to engage people in spiritual practices outside of your typical worship setting. I don't believe in prayer, but I do believe that you can pray with your feet. Had I told myself at the age of 16 that I was going to go to seminary, I would have called bullshit. It seems really silly for an atheist, right, to want to study theology and to study the world religions, and yet that's exactly what I did. This false barrier that we put up that atheists do not have spirituality and that seminary is only for Christians or Jews or Muslims. CTS is the only school that had the flexibility of an online program, but also a dedication to interreligious engagement. CTS was the first to do a field placement for theological education. They spearheaded that. That's why I can have my job at USC and learn from it while in reflection with my faculty members who are in Chicago. When I first started studying religion, my parents thought I was going to be a nun because I was Catholic after all. And so how odd it is now to be at this point where I'm openly secular. I'm an atheist and I want to study at a seminary because I recognize that these traditions, thousands of year-old traditions, have value to us in the aesthetics, in the celebration of life, in how we create meaning for ourselves. CTS has provided the space for me to reflect on higher education and the field of interfaith. There's always something to be learned, and it is within the seminary setting that I can really adjust how I approach my work and take a new look at it.
I am Danielle Bahuro. Advocate Trinity Hospital is located on the south side of Chicago in what we call an economically depressed community. I love chaplaincy. You want to know why? Because in chaplaincy, you shut the hell up. You are not the one with the answers. It is the patient, it is the client, it is the person who is in that bed who has all of the answers. Your job is to be quiet and act as sounding board or listening board as persons talk out and openly reflect on their beliefs. Chaplaincy says that you do not have to have all of the answers. Chaplaincy says that persons who are sick have all of the answers intrinsically within themselves. They just need someone to openly process with. And so what I love about chaplaincy is it turns capitalism upside down. It turns hegemony upside down. It turns patriarchy upside down. And it says, in some sense, that our job is to believe that people are smart enough to make their own decisions and have faith in humanity's ability to embrace that which is within themselves. CTS helped me to liberate my life. CTS caused me, forced me, helped me, encouraged me, invited me to think outside the box. What does it mean to see social justice as a call to ministry? As soon as I say I went to Chicago Theological Seminary, doors open. CTS is offering a strong academic rigor that is radically different, pushing the status quo, if you will. I don't believe that ministry is pastoring anymore. I don't believe that ministry is chaplaincy anymore. I believe that as we move forward, we have to expand our mindset around what do we view and define as ministry. And so for me, I view ministry as more social justice oriented. In an age of Black Lives Matter, I believe ministry is how do we become involved in social justice organizations. I believe ministry is how do we become involved with political organizations. I believe that ministry is how do we become involved and radically impact what I want to call is social ills. Ministry is larger than the church. When I think about the new motto, which is Leaders for the Next for me is always a question mark. We have to expand our mindset around what do we view and define as ministry. I view ministry as more social justice oriented. Ministry means ministering to the question mark. I believe ministry means to stand with people who society may say are dirty, who society may say are ugly, who society may say is muddy and filthy, and tell people, those people who are oppressed and looked down in society, that God loves them in the space and place that they are. I credit CTS with saving my life and helping me to discover the person that I am today. I don't think that I would have had that experience if I had went to another seminary.
My name is Jennifer Sanders. I am the pastor of Beloved Community Church. Here in the South, a lot of people's image of a pastor is a man, usually a straight man, usually a man that matches their own ethnicity. But the fact is, many of us who don't match that image are called by God to be in ministry, and to be in ministry in communities where we can have an effective presence. On any given day, I may be dealing with a leaking roof, one of the homeless guys who lives around here who needs a place to stay for the night, meeting someone to talk for coffee about something that's going on in their lives, about immigration rights, about our local sanctuary movement, about racial justice and Black Lives Matter. It ranges from the minute to the broad. I have my Master's of Divinity from Chicago Theological Seminary. You can get a seminary education in Birmingham, Alabama, but you can't get a progressive seminary education in Birmingham, Alabama. The seminary that's here is Southern Baptist, and they don't much care for people like me. CTS has made a real commitment to doing quality online education and therefore making it accessible to people, not only across distance, but also it allows people to stay involved and immersed in their own community. My life is here in Birmingham. My partner works here in Birmingham. My child is in school here in Birmingham. So I was not at a good place to pick up and move. CTS is a place where you learn what the Bible says, but you also learn that you need to know what it means. CTS brought me into deep conversations with people all over this country who were committed to doing important work in the interface of spirituality and justice. One of the most important things was the ability to take what I was learning in the classroom and turn around and use it in my daily life. The work that I do calls for a particular type of courage. I think that seminaries have often prepared pastors for the church that was. I think there's something to be said for trying to figure out how we prepare people for ministry in the world as it is and is becoming. This work is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's also the most fun. It's the most challenging and yet the most fulfilling. It's heartbreaking on a daily basis. It's also deeply meaningful. And in the end, this is where I'm called to be.
My name is Otis Moss III, and I am Senior Pastor at Trinity United Church of Christ. Trinity is a congregation of over 7,500 people physically, another 9,000 virtually. We utilize 360 worship, which means bringing together all elements of worship, whether it's drama, dance, music, all of that. Understanding that people learn in a variety of different ways. Some people are tactile, some people are auditory, some people are visual, and especially for a postmodern generation, when you bring all of those elements together, it has a higher impact. One of the things that we do here every year is what we call the Ma'afa. We turn the entire sanctuary into the Amistad, and we track the movement of people of African descent from West Africa all the way to the United States, lifting up something that is deeply out of our tradition, but also celebrating from that 360 model. I mean, our February, we believe we do Black History Month unlike any church in the nation, and people come from miles around just to see what it's like from first Sunday to the fourth Sunday in February. Any good seminary that's serious about progressive postmodern ministry has to be head and heart. I was looking for PhD programs. My focus for my project was what was called 360 Degrees of Worship. CTS was a natural fit for me to be able to engage these ideas in an academic environment, but also still have my foot in a practical ministry environment. How do you gain an understanding of everything from what the Harvard Business Review is saying, and simultaneously, you need to also be up on some of the latest theological information that is happening, exegetical engagement, and then also what is happening on a political and social level. So I need to be up on my administration. I need to understand exegetical work, hermeneutical interpretation, and then at the same time, understand what's happening within the community, socially, politically, and economically. You have to be able to juggle all of those things. So you can't be just passionate about one thing. You have to develop gifts in other areas that, I never thought that I was going to be getting the Harvard Business Review and finding out that there's some really relevant things in reference to organization that corporations have already worked out that have much larger staffs than we do at Trinity.
Don't believe the hype that there's more power in the boardroom than there is in the prayer room. Just don't believe the hype that when we come together that we can change the entire world. In the words of one great person by the name of Jesus, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. And just to give a little remix by Drake, we started from the bottom, but guess what? We here right now. So we are doing our thing. And so do not believe the hype of what has happened, that corporations are trying to tell us that there's more power on Wall Street than there is on Main Street. So make sure you raise the consciousness of our community.
Today we're out here for supporting workers at Walmart so that they have a livable wage. We're also out here supporting the fact that we believe that the faith community should support workers who are in need of health care, livable wage, and also a just economy.
You're not going to break me down, and you're not going to stare me down. The only way you're going to do that is when you give me that 25 plus. Give my people, they 25 plus they $13 to $13 an hour. Give them they 40 hours. Stop these retaliations and these threats. Once you do that, then you can come and talk to me.
You know, this is an economic justice conference, so that means we can't just talk about these issues. We have to be out in the streets. We got to be standing with workers. You know, our biblical texts tell us to do justice. They don't say talk about justice. It says do justice. And so, in fact, we are here today to do justice.
We want justice when we want it now.
Going to CTS and being confronted with such a diverse student body is absolutely wonderful. Not just diverse geographically, and also diverse in terms of their faith journey, which is exciting. When I suggest anyone to go to seminary is find out who is teaching there, what do they teach, what are their passions, what have they written. I loved my seminary experience at Yale, but it was in no way as diverse as being a part of the CTS community. CTS is preparing students for the next Great Awakening, Reformation, and emergence of new communities of faith that will be transformative in a very progressive, diverse, fluid America.
We're glad you've been with us for this special edition of Sanctuary on the transforming mission and ministries of Chicago Theological Seminary. Your thoughts and reactions to issues and ideas at the intersection of life and faith are important to us, and we want to hear from you. Email us at gcbm@ameritech.net, visit our website at gcbm.org, and write to us at Sanctuary in care of the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries, 77 West Washington Street, Chicago 60602. That's the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries, 77 West Washington Street, Chicago 60602. I'm Lydia Talbot. Thanks for keeping faith with us today on Sanctuary. May peace be with you.
Thank you.